Now, Jim, mark it down. This is just the beginning for you, sir. You have many things to do in the field that you're already an expert on. Okay, Maggie.
I just remembered something that John has taught to us many times, and that is when you make a commitment to do something, you will be asked to do many things that will push your buttons and that will disrupt your comfort zones in many ways. And as we make a commitment, we look at that commitment every day and reestablish that commitment. And I find myself needing to do that a lot with this work and with where we're headed with teaching body electronics. And when we were in Australia last year, I realized that the traveling was going to become an even bigger part of our lives, and so I had to reestablish my commitment to the work, which I had already done, but recognizing that that meant doing what we were asked to do. And so the summer when, by the way, in 1995, my husband was in our home 13 weeks of that year.
And 4 of those were in instructor's course.
Right, so he wasn't home very much, and when we left Australia, we thought we were going to have this summer that was kind of free, and there wasn't much going on. We said, oh, okay, well, we'll just hold points on one another, and we'll just, you know, catch up on some things. And as it turns out, he wasn't home. And so when Esther called up on the phone, said, we want Doug here. Doug wasn't home, of course, because he wasn't home. He was at Lewis's. I said, okay, well, I'll have to talk to Doug about this, and we'll see. He's got 10 days in between here, and we're going to have to fit it in somehow. And I talked to Doug, and Doug always, I'm grateful for this, he always consults me before he does a seminar and says, how do you feel about this, and how does this fit in? And he says, I don't know, Maggie. He says, it's only 10 days. That means I'm going to be away. I'm going to come back for one day and leave again. And I just said, Esther needs you there. She's been working really hard to get this together, and I just feel that if you don't go, it's going to be a missed opportunity. Okay, about 6 days into the trip, 7 days into the trip, when I hadn't heard from Doug, I was going, ah! I was being tested and wondering, why did I tell him to go? Megan said, you told him to go. You made him go. He left us. It's your fault. I'm getting blamed because Doug's gone. I'm pulling my hair out. But finally, when I got a hold of Doug and I talked to him, he shared some of the things that had happened down there, and one of the main things he told me was the gratitude that he was received with, and the continuous gratitude that was given to him for just being there, regardless of everything else. And then he told me the story of Nimrod's daughter, whose shoulder was all calcified, and how it just in this one session she had this great results. And I was just overcome with emotion, because then I knew that it was just perfect, and I felt so grateful that I had followed my commitment and stayed with that, even though it meant hardships for us in some ways. And when I looked at all these people here from Tanzania, I just was overwhelmed, because I think if Doug hadn't have gone there, I mean, I'm sure, Esther, you would have found a way, but I just I'm you know, it makes it all worthwhile.
Thank you, Maggie. At this time, J2, you have something that you'd like to share, sir? Pardon me? Not right now. Would you share when you feel that the appropriate time is? Okay, Doug.
Well, I was listening to all of you here, and it was making me very nostalgic in a lot of ways. And I was particularly struck by David Whistler's comment when he said, I don't know how Doug did it for 6 years alone in the States. And first of all, I was never alone, because I've always had the support of my wife Maggie and my children, and both of our families as well have always been behind us in this. But I certainly won't pretend that it's ever been easy. And also appreciated Jim's comment that maybe he was just too stupid to know when to quit. And I think in a lot of ways that's maybe Mag and my story in body electronics in the States, is that in a lot of ways we've just been too stubborn to quit, or I don't know if it's too stubborn or too stupid, but we've kind of hung in there. And I wanted to just kind of share a few things with all of you here. When you're out there doing body electronics, don't make the mistake that I've certainly made at some times in the past of measuring your success or failure by the numbers of people that you're working with. Don't because I hear a lot of people talking about the point-holding group and, oh, we have 50, or we only have 10, or we only, it doesn't matter how many people you're working with. I've taught in the United States, let's see, since 1989 I've taught 12 sets of instructor seminars in the States, and the biggest single week I've ever had was, I think, around 22 people. That's the biggest week I've ever had for an instructor's course. I've on several occasions, twice I think, had an entire week of the instructor seminar for one person. One person, and to me it's like, well, that one person must really want to be there. And so I've done the best job I could, and believe me, that one person one time was an iridology class, and believe me, that person really learned iridology because there wasn't anybody else to answer the questions. So the thing to realize is don't fall into this rut of worrying about the numbers. You're going to get the right people and the people that are ready for it. And I think to a certain extent you're also going to get the people that you're capable of handling. And you'll be in a lot of ways it's kind of a nice thing to start off with smaller numbers, because I think for most of us it'd be pretty overwhelming if we ended up having 100 people the first time we're out there teaching by ourselves. One of the things that you'll find in body electronics is that one of the greatest challenges that you'll face is the simple fact that you're not John Ray. I'm quite serious about that. That's one of the greatest challenges out there, if you let it be a challenge.
John Ray's come and go.
Yeah. We were talking yesterday about the concept that we need to learn to see beyond personalities and look at principles. In other words, we need to place our faith and our trust in principles, not simply personalities. As John says, John Ray's will come and go, Anita's will come and go, Doug's will come and go. We'll all come and go, but truth is eternal. Principles, if it's true now, it will always be true. And this is where we have to place our trust. I can tell you from my own experience, where I've done a lot of seminars in different areas where John's already taught and people are familiar with John, that you're always going to run into all sorts of things simply by the fact that you're not John. And what I would say to you here is, don't worry about that. If it's somebody else's problem, let it be their problem. If it's somebody else that studied with John in the past, or studied with me in the past, or studied with whoever, it's fine if they want that to be their problem, but you don't have to make it your problem. You can be happy to be yourself, and if you can just do the best job that you're capable of doing, everything's gonna work out fine. If I had concerned myself over the years with whether I was doing as good a job as John Ray would have done in the seminars, I would have gone nuts or thrown in the towel 10 years ago. You can't worry about whether you're doing as good a job as John could do. You just have to worry about whether you're doing as good a job as you yourself are capable of doing. And that's I think, something very, very important here. Esther was mentioning how, she kind of, and I guess it must be genetic because Sama's going to the same thing there, how she's kind of like stalled and not, jumped right in and taught because she felt like she didn't know it well enough. Well, guess what? None of us know it well enough. None of us here really know it well enough. We're all doing the best we can through our very, shall we say, through our own great variety of human weaknesses. All of us here, without exception, are stumbling along in partial darkness.
Guess what? Esther now knows exactly what to do, and she's not stumbling around in darkness.
Yeah. One of the things that I told Esther in some of our communications is that she can't, in fact, I think I told Jenny the same thing, don't wait to be perfect before you teach, because you'll never be perfect. You'll never be be ready to teach if you wait. Part of your process of becoming perfect will be teaching. Part of your learning process will be getting out there and teaching. Now, when John and Anita left the United States 6 or 7 years ago, Mag and I had really only just begun to teach seminars. We'd been teaching for a couple of years at that point, and we were still pretty wet behind the ears. I think we still are in a lot of ways. And yet we found ourselves in a situation at a pretty, just check there for me. Yeah. Not too bad. Wet. All righty. So we found ourselves at a pretty young age, really at the forefront there in body electronics in the States. I mean, I was like 27, Mag was 24, and there we were, doing seminars. And we couldn't afford to worry about whether or not we were, well, plus we looked like we were about 18. That's why I grew the beard. I figured I was finally old enough to shave it. Now that I'm a very, mature old man here. So we just figured we were going to do the best job we could. And something that Mag said up here, which I very much agree with, is we felt a real responsibility to get out there and teach body electronics. We felt like it was our responsibility to give back the things that we had received. And we weren't going to worry, a whole lot about whether or not we were going to make a living at it. We were just going to do it and do the best job we could. I mean, I've noticed a lot of people here have said, well, they want to be doing it, but there's that security mindedness that creeps in. When I first started teaching body electronics, I'd been making a lot more money driving a taxi cab on Maui than I was making teaching seminars, but somehow we always got by. Somehow we always managed to get by. A period of a couple years in there when AJ was young, where I was working another job and still teaching seminars, like working 5 days a week and traveling on weekends. So sometimes you're not always going to be able to support yourself. Don't make that your focus of attention. Don't worry about the financial aspects of it. I guarantee you if that's where your focus of attention is, you're going to fall flat on your face. So make your focus of attention to be out there to be of service to other people. And be willing to serve, be ready to serve. And that's really what you have to do, is be ready and willing to serve. And then if if people come to you, fine. If they don't, well, you do something else. You pick mangoes or something. But you do what you can. And if you have to get another job so that you can keep doing body electronics as a hobby, well, that's what you have to do sometimes. But don't, place your emphasis, first and foremost on being of service, because the opportunities out there are greater than I've ever seen. I mean, it's at the point now where there's no possible way John, Anita, and I can even remotely cover all the invitations for seminars in the next year or two, even just for the weekends. And I think the day is probably not that far off where we won't even be able to do all the instructor seminars that are going to need to be taught. I mean, probably it's not all that far off, a few years down the line, where there's going to be hopefully a lot of other people out there who will be qualified by then who'll be teaching instructors courses.
You're already there, Doug.
Yeah. So the...
Are you done?
I'm never done, but go ahead.
Well, I want to really thank Maggie for her discourse, because as John's wife, when I made this commitment to him, I didn't realize the total implications of it. And John can tell you, I've been there kicking and screaming at times, because when people come up to him and ask him something, they don't realize, but they're also asking me that too, because I am so much a part of his life. And it's been times where it's been very hard, but when I've seen the outcome of everything, I'm so grateful that my decisions. And also I want to say that, people have come up and asked me about, do we have children? And I say, can't you see all the people around me? I didn't realize when I joined up with John that the world would be my children. And this has been very powerful.
We have a question that needs to be answered. I appreciate everything that everyone has said. I appreciate especially the support that Anita has been. She's been an absolute angel. I don't know how to describe her any other way. When Yogananda sent her to me, that's exactly what happened. And I didn't, the whole story is a very beautiful story. Maybe Anita will share that with you sometime. But when Yogananda sent her to me and told her, this is the work that you've been looking for, Yogananda had to support her a couple times along the way. Also, by coming to her and giving her some very quiet, sagely advice. But the thing is this is wherein I've been very grateful for that, because without a good helpmate supporting me rather than trying to destroy me on one hand by compromising everything I believe in that I have learned by experience, Nita has been supporting me in everything I believe in. And that has been a wonderful, wonderful addition to my life, because I have never in my life had that until my sunset years, so to speak. But that's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. So I want to just openly express my appreciation to Anita, especially for her understanding and for understanding the vision that I have had. And that's been wonderful. Let's talk about niacin. Question. I stopped taking niacin because it had a rapid aging effect, causing deep lines in my face. The lines in the skin stayed throughout the day. The skin went back to normal after a few days of being off niacin. Could you please explain why this would happen? Pamela. Okay? Now, you tell me, what happens when you take niacin? Come up here, please. Now, this is important business, and you better understand this, because this question here is a common question that we have.
It takes all the nutrients out to the extremities.
Elizabeth?
Oh, I've been watching everybody else do this, now it's my turn. It takes all the nutrition out to the extremities of the body, so the way I understand it, if the lines in the face are the result of that, that's something you need to go through. It's a healing crisis in itself, and then after that, you'll have smooth skin.
Okay, has anybody yet had the experience of having their face and their skin peel off in huge sheets after taking niacin? Okay, how many people? Tom, is this correct for you, sir? Would you come up here, please? And this is another example of what we're going to discuss here. Elizabeth, are you through?
I am, actually.
Okay. Then, Tom, I'd like to have you explain your experience here, because this you must understand. Now, many people will call this a terrible, terrible allergic reaction.
When I got back from Lewis's, and I decided to just hit it full tilt on taking as many minerals as I could and go into crisis and everything else, Doug wrote out a thing for me and said, yeah, take 500 milligrams of niacin. And I 500, okay, fine. So that's what I started doing, taking 500. And niacin, that doesn't really bother me, gives me a flush, but you know, it's no big deal. It's like running energy, so I figured it's working. I went out in the lake with a friend of mine, spent 2 hours on a very sunny day. I don't burn. I'm not one of those people that burns. I came home, took some niacin, and I flushed. And I got the next day, my entire body was red. I mean, from my face all the way down, I'm going, okay, what's going on? I didn't think I got burnt that bad. Geez, I'm fried. That night, 500 milligrams of niacin again. I stayed red for about 4 days, and I couldn't believe this stuff. And I never peel. Well, I peeled, and I peeled. I peeled some more. I was walking through the house with a vacuum cleaner everywhere I went, because, no, this is serious. This is not, I'm not making this up. I had piles of skin where I would sit in my chair when I was trying to meditate, and I'd go, I was like a snake shedding, and people would come over and go, have you cleaned your house? And I'd go, this is the truth. You cleaned your house? I go, I just vacuumed. Well, look, I can see, you know, it was like from my bedroom, you know, into the kitchen, stuff like that, and I was shedding. The stuff would, you know, I went through like 3 or 4 layers of skin because I kept taking my niacin at night, and seriously, I peeled, I think, 4 different times through this, and finally I said, Doug Morrison, you jerk. And put the niacin up there and stayed off it for a good 2 months or so until I healed. I mean, I was afraid to go out at all in the summertime because I don't burn, and here I was. Everything. I mean, clothes. It was ridiculous. It looked like a snake shedding its skin. And
was the skin dry and scaly?
I don't remember. It just flaked right off. I mean,
okay,
people would come up to me and
go. Did
go,
you look at your face? Was your face just kind of dry and scaly, looking like the skin is aging and withering away? Or did you notice?
I don't look at myself that much.
Okay. Continue on, Tom.
It's taken a long time for the skin of my arms. I mean, it looked like, well, first, and I'm doing minerals all the time, too. So I noticed on the backs of my arms, because I ride motorcycles a lot like that, that it was like coming up. I was having things coming up from my skin. It was like burning again. My shoulders across here. As soon as it would peel, it would go away. Then all of a sudden, the new skin would come across. And then all of a sudden, it's like I'm breaking out or something, like I'm in high school. And here I am going, what is this, man? You know, on my arms and stuff, and it's just like stuff was coming out of my body. And I was going, this program sucks. I think I was calling Lewis on this thing, too, and go, I think I'm dying. What's going on? But, no, I peeled. To be real serious on it, I peeled probably at least 4 layers of skin, and I think I peeled for about a month. And this is from a person who does not burn and does not peel. Scandinavians don't do that, I thought. So, yeah, it was not fun. But the niacin didn't bother me. I like taking that stuff.
You're still taking it?
Not here. I didn't want to peel.
That'll be very appealing.
Oh, man, now I know where Doug gets this. No, I'm going to get the good B complex. I'm going to go back home, knock that stuff down at night, and see what happens. I don't want to use my electric blankets or anything.
You get the niacin. Take some niacin while you're here. We'll appreciate you.
You heard him. Who's got niacin? Oh, thanks, Ian. Yeah, I kind of figured. Misery loves company, not you, Brooke. Nuh-uh. Only if you come over tonight in the skirt. Then I'll take the niacin.
Thank you, Tom, very much, sir. Okay. The niacin will put you into various forms of healing crisis. One is sometimes the skin looks like it has reached where you've aged 40 years. And then it does peel off occasionally, or it goes through some sort of a change without the peeling, and then all of a sudden you've got the skin of about a 17-year-old person. As the skin goes through that tremendous healing crisis where it appears like the skin goes through this extreme aging. Now this happens. Don't let that worry you. You continue on until it's over and done with. I had one lady in Chicago one time. She started taking the niacin, and her skin started to break out. And it broke out all over into red running sores that lasted 2 months. Now, her skin was very, shall we say, dry and scaly. She was in her 70s, and she was very disturbed over this because she had to go to all these important elitist functions in Chicago. Her husband was the chairman of the board of directors of a large corporation, and she had to always look at her best. Well, when these red running sores popped out all over her, she was not happy. It was up in her hair, all over her face, all down to the front of her body in a perfect line right across here. It turned out that she used hairspray, and a hairspray to her, right here to her clothing. And her skin broke out with all this terrible running sores, and when it was complete, her skin was as beautiful as a 17-year-old girl, and guess what? She didn't need the hairspray for her totally gray hair. She went through healing crisis, and when you're in the middle of it, I told her, you just keep going until it's over. She said, I don't have any choice, do I? I says, no, because if we leave you in the middle of it, then you're going to have problems the rest of your life with that, and we can't leave you in the middle of it. So one thing for instructors, you tell a person that which begins the healing crisis nutritionally will take you eventually through it. So what you start with, and it throws you into something that you don't understand, continue taking it until it's over and done with. Now, there's only one contraindication on your niacin. If you have serious ulcer problems and you take niacin and you have this tremendous pain right below the center of the rib cage, quit taking the niacin. Make sure you take about 2 to 3 ounces of Schweitzer formula 3 times a day, and in about 3 days your ulcers will be pretty well healed up. Then you come back on the niacin again. But heal up the ulcers first, and there's nothing like a little while ago, if you remember, Donna had mentioned how just taking the Schweitzer formula dissolves scar tissue. It does it the same thing on mucous membrane as well as externally. And this will heal up your ulcers just very, very quickly. Pardon? Right under here. Just under the rib cage, right in the middle. That's where you would have possibly duodenal ulcers, where a lot of people who are under a lot of stress, will have ulcer conditions, and this will materialize a bit while you're taking the niacin. And that's the only contraindication we didn't discuss that I wanted to make sure that you understood and knew about. Okay? Any questions? Yes, Nikki. Pardon me? Can it cause nausea and vomiting? By all means. Because the nausea and the vomiting, oftentimes, this is part of the healing crisis. And when that niacin, as a vasodilator, allows all the nutrients in the body to get right out to the cell level, it's also the cell level of the intestines. It's the cell level of every organ of the body. And if you have any suppressed traumas that haven't been dealt with, these will come back. Sometimes you'll sit there and shake like a leaf. You'll think you're dying for sure, and then you're afraid you're not going to. I mean, there's a number of things that can happen for maybe 45 minutes to an hour until the niacin has run its course. Now, that's why it would be advisable to start out with small amounts of niacin and gradually build up. And don't start with 500 milligrams of niacin unless it's a time-release niacin. Now, if you chew your time-release niacin, you're in trouble, because you have 500 milligrams right there, boom, going into the system. And it's, so if you chew that 500 milligrams, you're going to be in trouble. Start with about 100 milligrams and gradually build up. And wait until the no more flushing at 100 milligrams, then double it a little bit, Take a little bit more, work with it, and then wait until no more niacin flush, then double it a little bit more. Any questions? The Schweitzer normally about 2 tablespoons, 3 times, about 1 ounce 3 times a day. But in some people who have tremendous problems where they need to have the healing inside of the body, about 6 ounces, sometimes 3 times a day. Because this stuff here goes through the whole body, and within 30 seconds of taking your Schweitzer, you have triggered the white blood cells immediately to move through the body. For example, if you're living in a fluoridated area, you can take a look at your live blood cell analysis and look at the blood, and the white blood cell just sits there. There's no movement. And this is why it is a known and established fact that fluoride in any form taken into the body destroys the immune system. Now, some of you have some very serious illnesses, and yet you're taking drinks that are where the water has been added in fluoridated areas. And so some of the drinks that you're getting from the various shops and so on, those drinks are fluoridated. And you're taking in water which has been added to these drinks, no matter how well it has been run through a charcoal filter or through some sort of a screening device. that water is still going to have fluoride in it. Now, the fluoride will destroy the immune system, but the Schweitzer formula is an absolute necessity to increase the immune system and on a continual basis until that body is able to correct itself. I remember we had one lady with a large tumor in her breast, and in Los Angeles. I was working in the black population of Los Angeles at that time, and she had this huge tumor. And I can recall so clearly how she usually reached under her bed for distilled water during the night, and she'd always drink about 16 ounces of distilled water. Well, she kept a Schweitzer then right beside the distilled water, and she took her little jug of Schweitzer out instead of the distilled water and took down 16 ounces in one sitting. And by the morning, this tumor that had been there that the doctors wanted to operate on was totally gone. It heated up and burned and burned and burned and burned and burned till that was gone. And the Schweitzer had a little hand in that. Doug has some things he wants to share with you on Schweitzer.
Well, I've seen a lot of real good results with the Schweitzer, and one of the ways in which it seems to be tremendously effective is anybody with any type of tumor, fibroids, any type of abnormal growth in the body. One of the things that the Schweitzer does is it creates a localized fever. It creates an elevated temperature in the abnormal tissue in the body. A friend of my mother-in-law's had come in for an eye reading probably 8 or 9 years ago, and she was scheduled to go in for a biopsy 2 weeks later because she had a big lump in the breast. And she wanted to get on a program, and she didn't have a lot of money, and she really only wanted to do, a few items. So I got her on like minerals, enzymes, and acidophilus, and not even all that much minerals. And I'm trying to think, well, gee, I only can probably give her one more thing. So I told her to drink about 4 ounces a day of Schweitzer. And this woman actually started passing corn and fuzzies inside of 24 hours, just on a small program like that. And by the time she went in for the biopsy 2 weeks later, they didn't even bother to do it because they couldn't find the lump. It was completely gone. And she wasn't really on much of a program, maybe 3 or 4 caps of minerals a day, 3 or 4 enzymes with a meal, a couple acidophilus a day. The main thing she was doing was that 4 ounces a day of Schweitzer, and inside of 2 weeks she'd gotten rid of the lump of the breast entirely.
What's the maximum of Schweitzer you can take, for example, for a seriously ill person? Would it be 6 ounces a day or something, as you suggested?
It's my understanding, after seeing this being used for years and years in Chicago and in the hospitals and where it's gone across the counters in the pharmacies and so on, there has never been any contraindications from the use of the Schweitzer. It has tremendous healing qualities, and like anything else, it's going to give you healing crises. So those things that have been suppressed will come back in reverse order, and you stay with it reasonably, like 2 ounces, say, 3 times a day, or 6 ounces 3 times a day in severe situations, until that Schweitzer is, until that condition has cleared up. Now, for some people, you do have in the mess hall, we have the papaya leaf drinks. Now, some of you who have some serious cancer situations should have that. You should also be very heavy on the mature green papaya drinks and get that papain in your system, which eats up your abnormal tissue. In the Cook Islands, we've had any number of people with severe external skin cancers, and they have put the Schweitzer formula, spraying it directly on the exposed tumor, which is like in breast cancer, for example, like the whole thing would be black, purple, and as hard as a rock, and spreading gradually out into the armpit and so on. And we've been able to reduce that down to where the pink flesh is back again, and everything had grown back out, and the persons are healing, and everything's coming right by putting the papain directly on the area here, mixed in alternately with the Schweitzer formula. So there's lots of things that can be done here, but you've got to get on it and continue that until that heals and regenerates. Yes, on the breast in the form of a poultice. They take the papaya leaves and put them right on that breast area. And you might say, well, the papain's going to eat up all the tissue. It's going to eat up dead tissue and leave the live tissue, and then the person will bleed quite considerably. Everything will run quite considerably, and then the body part will heal. But the papain will not hurt healthy tissue. It'll destroy any type of necrosed tissue, and that does have to come off.
I have a little meter that Alan Piper sent me. It's just for testing water. If the water's pure and it hasn't got any fluoride in, it'll read 00. Tap water runs about 6 to 7. Min Plus is around about 9, 15. And I thought, I wonder what Schweitzer is. I put it in the Schweitzer, it read 117. So it's an excellent electrical conductor.
Now, if you have on the patient's guide, which will be coming here as soon as we can get your orders here, on the patient's guide, there's a whole area there on the Schweitzer formula that you should study and look at in all of your spare time. Okay. Any questions?
I've got something I'd like to share with, and Doug knows about this. I'm working with a girl who's a quadriplegic, and she got into a healing crisis a little while back, and it was a bit of a panic situation because the parents and that weren't up on the program. And I rang Doug, but in the meantime I'd been up there, and the doctor they'd got the doctor in, and she had a bladder infection, and she used to have bladder infections quite regularly, and since she's had the accident that's made her a quadriplegic, she had bladder infections, but she couldn't actually tell when they were happening because her body was numb. Now, when she got into the healing crisis, they were desperate to do something, and for some reason she's got a terrible block about drinking Schweitzer, and I was sort of thinking, my goodness me, I've got to think of something to do, because she was passing blood and clots. So I just suddenly the thought came, why not put? She had a catheter in. Why not put a Schweitzer fluid in the catheter, right, and straight into the bladder? And she had an amazing recovery. I just suggested we use a tablespoon in the water, and they just reversed the flow, yes, and flushed her out with it, and she was amazing, like within a number of hours. And then I referred to Doug and said, well, I hadn't heard of that before, but it was just a spot of the moment thing. That's what I had to react.
It's a very unusual situation because she has a catheter that goes straight into the bladder. So it was unusual because I've never actually seen the opportunity to put the Schweitzer straight into the bladder before.
Yes, so that's mainly what, and I was just asking if that, in a situation like that, it's not a dangerous thing to do, is it?
No, it's not a dangerous thing to do. You cannot harm a person with the Schweitzer formula.
Great. The other question we'd like to ask is, when you're using papaya leaves, do we have to use male leaves, or can we use, what are the, because we're completely ignorant over there. We haven't really got the papaya, so...
I don't know, Rex.
Okay.
I have never had to distinguish between the male and female papaya leaves because they all have the papain and the active ingredients in it.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
I've never heard that it should be one or the other. I just haven't heard about that. Now, there may be a difference, but I don't know what it is.
Is it right on that, Simon?
I think that the reason that people use the male leaves is that the female is the fruit bearer, and a big problem with pawpaws is keeping the leaves over the fruit so they don't burn. So that's why people are using the male leaves. But we've been using male and female leaves. And
thank you.
Your statement that the papain burns only dead tissue made me think of something that burns off living tissue in me. I'm usually quite obedient, and so because it's hard to get green papaya in Victoria, I've been aiming to eat kiwi fruit every day, 2 before each meal. But I love kiwi fruit, and I get these excellent New Zealand organic kiwi fruit, so sometimes I fancy more. Now, I find that if I eat 3 or 4 kiwi fruits, after 2, it burns the skin off the inside of my mouth.
That's
living
correct.
Skin.
But that's the outer layer of the skin. It leaves it raw if you don't have a way of helping it down. That's correct. You take your hands and pick the papain and get that into that white milky sap. It'll eat the outer layer of skin off your hands.
Especially
but that'll heal quickly, no problem. But just realize it will eat the dead skin.
Okay, I already asked Anita, but I wanted to know for on the tape if it matters if you use distilled water to mix the Schweitzer up, or if it can be any water that doesn't, does it matter if there's minerals in it or not?
If you want to be sterile, use distilled water according to the instructions. But I have used just any kind of water. You mix it up and it works. A lot of people are concerned about certain types of water coming out of the streams where there might be giardia or there might be other, shall we say, pollutions that's there. If you're not concerned about that, don't worry about it. The Schweitzer will still give you the results you're looking for.
Okay, a couple other questions. Can you use the Schweitzer in the eyes?
Yes, you can use the Schweitzer in the eyes. It'll burn. But oftentimes used as an eye wash, you have all this junk coming out of your eyes that if you use it as an eye wash, in the morning you're going to have to kind of have something like a damp rag there to pull that stuff across because it'll just cement it shut. Okay? Pardon me? You should dilute it a little bit, but the thing is it won't hurt you to put it in straight. It will burn.
Okay, we found that, I don't know, I know you use it in douches, but we found if we mixed the Schweitzer 50-50 with the minerals that it works really nice on vaginal yeast infections.
No problem.
One, did a great job.
Perfect.
There was something else, but I forgot what it was. So.
Thank you, Donna.
I've been spraying Schweitzer in my eyes every day, sometimes several times a day, and it's not a problem at all, just a slight stinging sensation.
Can you use dried papaya leaves?
Some people are using the dry papaya leaves, provided they're dried at a temperature lower than 110, shall we say, like a freeze-dried, lower than 110 Fahrenheit, 42, 43 degrees centigrade.
Freeze-dried wouldn't do it.
But don't dry them at a high temperature because it'll destroy the active ingredients.
I just wondered if they were available in the States.
I don't know. You have in the States you have the what we call a powdered mature green papaya that you get from Enzymes International.
She's talking about the leaves.
I don't know about the leaves.
For the tea, I don't know for sure, but I would guess with the leaves that the 110 wouldn't really make much difference because we're boiling it anyways. It's a different...
No, if you're going for the leaves and you're going for the active ingredients in the leaves, you have to boil it for about 3 hours. It takes about 3 hours of boiling to make a strong tea to get the active ingredients out. We're at Purdue University. This will be part of your handout material. At Purdue University, they have found that it has a active ingredient which is about 1 million times more powerful than any other known ingredient to fight cancer. And we have found that this does work. But you're going to have to to boil the leaf for at least 3 hours to release that active ingredient. And this is an old Aboriginal remedy.
Is there nowhere then here where one can buy dried papaya leaves here in Australia? If one could take them back with one? Or
I have no idea.
right.
I don't know. Does anybody know where you can get dried papaya leaves here? I don't know.
I have two more questions, John. When one's taking the Schweitzer, should one mix it with water then? And we've been just taking it neat.
No problem.
Good.
Put it in fruit juice, no problem. Put it with your oxygen, no problem.
Yeah, we just take it just like that. I mean, just drink it just like that.
No problem.
Okay. And the other thing is there anything like papaya over in Europe or in the colder countries? Anything is good?
There's two things that have the same effect as your papain. One is Ficin from your black mission figs.
You writing this, Wolf?
Ficin, F-I-C-I-N, from your black mission figs. And then you have other types of plants that will have that same milky sap, that will have the different formulations, much like papain in that. But they're not economically available. Commercially available.
Dandelion?
Pardon
like
me?
a dandelion, for example?
Dandelions, if you take the milkweed, for example, and take that white sap and put it on a wart, it'll dissolve your wart.
Right.
Now, you put it on the brown spots on the skin, it'll lighten up the brown spots on the skin. It will have some sort of a proteolytic enzyme and an activity there, which is quite interesting.
Oh, wow. Great. Thank you. We got lots of those.
Yeah. Now, I think the dandelion has a similar type quality to answer your question there.
Does taking the Schweitzer in combination with the Min Plus have any effect on the efficacy of the Schweitzer or the absorption of the minerals from the Min Plus?
To our understanding, there is no problem. Either way. Simon.
Has papain ever been used on the eyes for cataracts?
I have no knowledge of that. I wouldn't use papain anywhere where you have mucous membranes because it would be terribly irritating. I just wouldn't do that. I don't think it's wise because it has a powerful, it will eat up any dead tissue, and it could have a terrible irritating effect to the membranes. I wouldn't put it in your eyes because the cataracts dissolve on their own on the program that we will be discussing. Yes, sir, Gary.
Sir John, not Sir Gary. In the case of spraying Schweitzer in the eyes, in the case of people who've had corneal transplants, is there a danger of the cornea becoming detached as a scar tissue?
We've had that happen. We have had people go on the programs who have had operations on their eyes. And we have had one case that I'm aware of, Gary, only one, where the implant in the eye literally fell out and came unattached as a scar tissue there from the operation dissolved. Now, he had to have that put back in again. No, the whole eye had to be refitted. And he said that the eye had always had given him a problem since he had it put in. But yes, there are cases where that has happened, and you must be aware of that.
If it takes 3 hours to boil the papain leaves, how long, what's the stability of the active ingredients?
Say that again?
If it takes 3 hours to boil the papain leaf, what will happen? A lot of people will be discouraged to do it. So my question is, can you do it once and then store them in a flask, say for the week?
No, it still has to be boiled for about 3 hours.
And then once you've boiled them, do you keep them?
It'll last about 5 days under refrigeration.
Under refrigeration.
And then it decomposes rapidly after that point. But 5 days is almost too long. 4 days would be better.
Thank you.
We've tried to keep it for 5 days, and it starts going off. Duncan.
My question is, with the Schweitzer, the quantities which you've been quoting, is that neat Schweitzer or is it let down? In other words, is it neat Schweitzer that you're quoting the quantities for, or is it Schweitzer that has been diluted with distilled water?
Just the straight, after you have taken the little package and made 4 liters out of it, okay, just the straight.
So it is
stuff.
the little package with the 4 liters.
That's right.
From there, and that is what we're working on for these quantities.
Yeah, I've never diluted it down from that. I just use it straight.
Fine. That's what I wanted to find out, whether you had to just take it as a powder or what. No, you take it like that.
Yep.
Fine. Thank you.
Donna.
I was wondering if you can boil the pawpaw for longer than 3 hours. I mean, if you wanted to cook it in a crock pot, would you have to, make sure that you stopped it at 3?
Well, we have done some for 5 hours, and the taste is just a lot stronger, and we have found it very effective at 5 hours, but doggone, it's just almost economically unfeasible.
Well, if you put it in a crock pot, if you went to work or something and came back, would it be all right to just leave it in the crock pot boiling while you left? I mean, because usually you can cook stews and stuff in a crock pot and not have to watch them and make it a lot easier for people that are really busy.
I don't think you're going to hurt it any.
Thank you.
Good idea. I don't think you're going to hurt it. Just don't let that boil out. Ruth.
I understand that you can reboil the pawpaw leaf tea after about 5 days if it started to go off.
Can you?
Can you?
I don't know. I haven't done that. I just haven't done that. I don't know if it could be done or not. You might want to try it, but I think the taste is almost unacceptable at that point.
I want to ask about the papaya leaf. If you sun-dry it and you have to use it, do you boil it for the same 3 hours?
Boil for 3 hours. Yes.
Okay.
Neil.
Yes, John, the situation with preparing the Schweitzer formula, the instructions say that it needs to be filtered. Now, I've never actually filtered it. But
I haven't either.
Oh.
But if you want to be a purist, and there are some people who really are insistent that everything be done right to snuff. They live in ultra clean areas, and they want everything filtered, and they don't want any specks floating around in there. If you're going to use it for an eye wash, it should be filtered. Get all the particles out. That would be proper. But if you're not using it as an eye wash, then perhaps it'll be fine. Just you heat up the water, mix it, and you're in good shape.
I've been making it for 10 years and have seen great results with it, and I've never filtered it. I've never done it with distilled water. It's usually just been reverse osmosis water, and I don't have a Pyrex or an enamel pot, so we've always just done it in a stainless steel pot, and it works just fine.
Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, also the sensitive leaf tea, the situation with reusing it after having made one preparation.
We'll talk about that later. Okay? Over here, Magella. Are you waiting for?
Yep.
No, she's next. No, she's next.
You mentioned earlier about whatever starts a crisis, a healing crisis. Does that mean everything? Like for myself, I went into a crisis with the liquid lactobacillus, with the distended abdomen and that. I persevered with it for 3 months, and I just couldn't sort of go through it. So, do I persevere?
We'd have to have an eye reading and find out specifically what the situation is and adapt. You always have the exception to the rule. And that is one thing you look for, is the exception to the rule.
If you think about the candida overgrowth, the concept that we'll probably talk about at some point here is what's called pleomorphism, which is where the internal environment is going to determine the types of microbes that will be present. It's not the microbes that make you sick. It's the fact that there's already a certain internal environment that will virtually create the particular microbes. If you have something like Candida, what you can all consider is that it will exist in a certain range, like between an upper parameter and a lower parameter. The Candida can disappear because you went down out of the range, which is essentially like your health has gone down, or it can also disappear because you went up out of the range. You got to a point where you're too healthy. Similarly, it can reappear because you went up in health into the Candida range, or because you went down into health, or down into the Candida range. Sometimes people are not able to get above that upper parameter. You're doing enough of a program that you're well up into the Candida range. Sometimes, because of certain other factors, people find it very, very difficult to get above that upper parameter to where they're completely healthy and above the point at which Candida can exist. So you have to start looking at a lot of other factors. One thing that I've seen happen in a great number of cases is I've found people with Candida where they just, no matter what they did, they couldn't get over the Candida as long as they still had the silver amalgam fillings in the mouth. And I've seen quite a few people who, once they've got the amalgam fillings out, the Candida's disappeared. Well, it doesn't have to be that. It could be something else. But as John says, there's other factors, and you may have something that's holding you back to where you're up into the healing crisis where you're starting to go back through it, but for some reason not quite capable of getting out the top of it.
Good.
With the black mission figs you told, did you mean leaves also or the fruit?
The fruit.
The fruit. Can it be also dried fruit?
Yes.
Simple. Thank you.
Okay, Doug whispered in my ear a few minutes ago about a particular problem that I ended up with this whole problem in my lap from an individual who felt that he was done a very severe injustice, where he was left smack dab in the middle of a healing crisis. Now, I'd like to have Doug tell you what the problem was from his perspective.
Out in Portland, Oregon, there's a point holding group that's been there for a while.
No names.
No, I know. And at any rate, there was a number of individuals there holding points, and I went out to Portland to do a seminar about a year and a half ago, and one of the individuals in the point holding group, the seminar was taking place in this one house, and the point holding group also happened to meet there and during the evening. And so it happened that the point holding group was coming in one particular evening, basically as the seminar was winding down, and this one individual there, they were having some difficulty finding a point on his neck. He reported that he'd had a lot of neck and shoulder and arm problems for probably 8 or 10 years previous. And since I was still there, I came over and helped locate a point kind of down here towards the base of the neck on his right side. And after that point, I went on about my business and went to the place I was staying. This we sort of only later on really pieced together what happened in the point holding session. But basically, you have to understand in a point holding session that it's quite possible for people to slide off a point. It happens all the time, particularly when your thumb's pretty numb. And in this particular individual's case, you had a couple things that went on. One was that most likely the point slid around a fair bit, but the other thing was he also got up in the middle of the point holding session to go to the toilet, and it seems pretty likely in hindsight, which of course is always 20/20, that that they probably didn't really get quite back on the original point. So for whatever reason, the point was never actually finished. They started into something, because we're looking at this principle of whatever starts a healing crisis is what's going to get you through it. And in this particular individual's case, this point was definitely not finished. He came back about 24 hours later at the end of the seminar, and explained to me that he was having a lot of trouble with his neck, like his head was kind of listing off to the side like that, and he was having a lot of stiffness and a lack of mobility in that right arm there.
And a lot of numbness in that area.
And I suggested to him that this was in fact a healing crisis, and that the best thing for him to do would be to call up some of the people in the point holding group and get the point, get back on the original point that had been held and make sure that it was finished off properly. This particular individual was he was of a mindset that he really, really did not want to believe that it was a healing crisis, and I spent a fair amount of time with him there trying to tell him that what he needed to do was go back and finish the point, and he wasn't really he wasn't accepting that premise. I mean, in his own mind, the reason that he was experiencing whatever symptoms he was experiencing was because something had been done wrong. He was basically convinced that there had been some sort of nerve damage as a result of the holding points there on the neck. At any rate, I didn't really hear anything else about it after that. After that week, I didn't hear anything else about it for a couple of months or so. But the friend of mine who was running the point holding group in that area got back in contact with me about a month or so later, and was kind of brought me up to speed on what was happening. And apparently, this individual had his condition had continued to worsen. He was having a lot of actual atrophy of the muscle structures in that area as a result of something from basically something had happened there with the nerve supply to some of the a portion of the trapezius muscle, and he was getting a very definite atrophy of the muscles there.
Okay, I want to explain something here on what Doug's responsibility is in this area, and I sent a very blistering letter out, if you remember, and two other people who are also involved in that he was left right smack dab in the middle of a healing crisis, and I've seen this happen many times. And when you're holding a point, what's the first area that the person begins to experience emotionally when a point is held where it's a new point, in, shall we say, in an area of an old injury? You're going to have unconsciousness or numbness. Now, you better get this down. Now, if the numbness is there, and you have a continuation of that numbness, and you let the person go home without completing that numbness, you better complete that the next day, and you better have a good knowledge as to where that point was. Because what did take place, indeed, was that the point that was being held, the person holding the point, slipped off several inches away from the original place that Doug put the person on. All right? Now, therefore, you have to understand that when a person is holding a point and their hand goes numb and their thumb goes numb, they don't know where that finger is, and that finger can slide 6 inches off of a point. Are you all with me on this? And you've all been there, because you wonder, well, where's the point? You don't know where your thumb is. This is part of the hazard of the course, all right?
Sometimes you wonder not just where the point is, but where your hand is.
Now, what I've been instructed during the nights, I've been told, don't hurry up and hold points on somebody. And I have to caution people over and over again, this is not a mechanical thing. This is a spiritual exercise, and you have to educate the person ahead of time to work with you. Because I wrote this person back a full letter of instructions, exactly what to do. He wouldn't follow one word of advice. He didn't follow Doug's advice. He didn't follow anybody else's advice, because he wanted to absolutely prove that everybody was wrong. Now, the thing is, if you leave a person in that position, you leave them right in the middle of a healing crisis, yes, you are going to get numbness to a given area. And if you don't finish that point, that numbness will remain there, and you can get an atrophic or an atrophying of the muscle and degeneration of the tissue, because you're in a numbed situation. Now, this numbness can be a big, deep genetic problem. It can be a number of other problems. But when you stay there, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 days to continue holding that same point until the numbness finally goes off. And then the person gets the feeling back in that numb part of the body. This is a hazard of the course. And this is where if you are a physician and you're holding a point, okay, if you're a physician and you're holding a point, you can't limit that session to, say, 20 minutes, your time is up, we'll see you next week. Because you might leave them in a situation that's not complete. You have to have an open-ended period of time and work with that person until that point is absolutely completed. This is your responsibility, and anything less than that is totally irresponsible on your part. I want to make that very clear. I made it very clear to these other people when I wrote them letters, because none of them had the time to work with this man, to continue working with that until that point was totally cleared up and his worry and concern was corrected. And sometimes we get involved in our own agenda and we simply tell the other person out of the hardness of our heart where it's a healing crisis, now go back and finish the point. When actually, if we put them on the point and the other people haven't followed through, then individually it comes back to us where we need to finish that doggone point. So if you have people handle a point, sometime you have to go in there and do what the other people are incapable or haven't got the mentality to do. Now, I'm sorry, but this is I'm not putting anybody down, but the thing is some people just don't listen and they haven't got the capacity to follow through until a point is completed. And then you do run across maybe one case every 5 years in this situation where people didn't follow through properly. They didn't have the right point. They let the thumb slip off the points, and then you have some serious complications. Here's where you don't hold points quickly on any one person until they are educated properly. And they must be educated that you just can't get up and go shopping in the middle of a session. You wait until it's completed. You wait until the points are what we call flat. No more heat, no more electricity, no more numbness, no more burning or whatever is there. And you wait until that point's totally flat before you leave that particular point. And then you're not going to leave that person in a duress situation which could result in long-term damage. Any questions on this? Now, I know there's questions there. Ask them now. Yes?
In the light of what you've just said, how valid then is a weekly point-holding group where people are going to work the next day?
Sometimes you have to get some sleep. We're dealing with human qualities now. But when you mark that point, and then you come back and finish that point the next day, but make sure that point is finished. Because sometimes there's just people cannot handle, shall we say, 16, 18 hours of constant point holding. They have to get some sleep, they have to get some food. There's certain creature demands that have to be taken care of.
Wolfgang and Tarek have a little bit of experience in finishing